Good morning. Welcome to Office Hours, the show where we answer your technical media production questions 7 days a week. Courtney's our reader today. Let's get right to it.
All right, look at that. The first question coming in is from a guy named Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. And Alexander wants to know, what would it take for an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO to support recording to ProRes 422 codec instead of the H.264? Is that something that you can see Blackmagic Design supporting in the future?
All right, go ahead, Courtney.
No, because ProRes 422 requires a lot of bandwidth, and if you were to do ISO recording for it, each 1080p is like 177 megabits per second. No, you're not going to have enough throughput to record anything more than one stream of that. You know, you can, if you want to record ProRes 422, you could get you a Blackmagic video assist, and with a high-speed video card, SD card, you can record ProRes to those. But generally, I don't think your USB bus or the processor that is built into the ATEM could handle that throughput for ISO recording of anything more than one stream, much less all the rest of the stuff that little processor's doing inside there. So I'd say even if they wanted to, they couldn't do it.
Osman.
Yeah, I used to record on my ATEM Extreme ISO recordings, but I found that if my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema is connected to the ATEM, the default recording would go to Blackmagic RAW. And it always presented a post-production problem because the files were just enormous. So I kind of stopped doing that and record locally if I have to when I do podcast. But as soon as the ATEM is, or the camera is connected to the ATEM, it just sits on RAW.
Yeah, it's really interesting because now with the Apple Silicon processors, you know, we've been kind of spoiled. We have this encode and decode support that's built into the processor. But it's really interesting before the Apple chips, you know, when we used to be on Intel stuff, I remember in my CPU tests when I would compare H.264 encode and decode and compare that to ProRes 422, it seemed like at least on the Mac platform that ProRes seemed to consume less processor cycles. So that's why it kind of the thought occurred to me that maybe it could be possible to do it. But I think you're right, Courtney. And I think both of you have a good point too. It's not just the file size. I mean, the device is really marketed at really content creators, podcasters, people that need quick turnaround time. And, you know, of course, they have to support these devices too. So you've got to support the external storage and making sure that those storage drives that people are using are going to be big enough and reliable enough to record those files. And, of course, the processing power, like you said, and that would increase the cost of it. But, hey, I can dream. It'd be nice. But to be able to do ProRes right now, I mean, to stick a dedicated file recorder, whether it's a Atomos or one of the Blackmagic Video Assists, which is probably the more cost-effective option, it's still quite a bit of money to stick one of those on every single camera. You know, if you've got 5 cameras or 4 cameras, it can get quite a bit more expensive. So not entirely sure if it'll be worth it, but something that I'm thinking about. All right, let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Zach asks, perhaps the basic question, but if my vMix live stream output is 720p, do all the NDI sources coming into vMix need to be set to 720p, or will vMix automatically downscale what it needs to?
Well, I'm not a vMix user, but in my experience using different software-based type of switchers like vMix, Mimo Live, OBS, Studio, and some of the other ones that are out there, nothing really is going to be set to any kind of automatic, and you wouldn't really want to. So usually I try to keep my whole pipeline consistent. So whatever sources, whatever format those sources are coming in for ingest, you know, if my camera feeds whatever's coming out of that camera, if it's say 1080p 2994, I'm going to make sure that those are set to the correct resolution frame rate coming in. And then of course, whatever's going out to my live stream, I'm going to make sure that that also conforms to the specs that I want. So now, of course, you can also upscale, and that's something that many of us do. Now, that was kind of the workaround many of us discovered a while ago, that if you're streaming to YouTube and you send more than 1080p resolution when you're encoding using H.264, we discovered that you go into a totally different encoding pipeline, and your stream gets encoded with the higher quality VP9 codec, and that was a noticeable improvement in color quality, image quality as well. So you can always upscale, but try to keep everything consistent. I wouldn't just assume it would be automatic, and I would definitely go into your output settings for your live stream and make sure that you're setting it to the resolution that you want, whatever requirements that platform has for that. Let's go to the next question.
Next one's kind of a related question coming in from Cindy Drosta in Erie, Colorado. Another vMix question. If some of my inputs are 4K 30 and the preset output is 1080p 60, will vMix send 60 frames per second to Zoom? Sounds like a trick question, doesn't it?
I feel like I need a little more context. It sounds like maybe you're trying to, maybe Cindy, if you're in the chat, you can comment. Are you trying to send something out of vMix back into Zoom? Are you using a virtual camera? If you are, then what's the question again? Some of my inputs are 4K 30 in the so that depends on the account that you have. So we know that as it was introduced a couple of months ago, there's a new feature coming to Zoom. You can pay extra for this. It's an add-on to Zoom that will support the higher bit rate, the doubling from 6 to 12 megabits per second, including the higher frame rates of 60. So assuming that you have that account, which I think is going to be rolling out this weekend or in the next couple of weeks, if you have that turned on in your account, then you should be able to get that higher frame rate. But you'll have to test it once you turn on that setting. I think once you add that to your account, you still have to go into the Zoom backend settings, make sure you flip on that setting as well. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, but if she is encoding at 30 frames per second frame rate, even though it's in 4K, I don't think it's going to interpolate and create extra frames for that 1080p 60. So I kind of doubt it, although I don't know vMix because I don't use it. I doubt that it's going to interpolate and add additional frames for as well as downscale from the 4K to the 1080.
Yeah. Well, you have
this is again and interpolate, and I think that was probably beyond the capabilities of vMix.
Well, I mean, I think that's something that you'd have to go in and adjust those settings. It seems this seems related to the other question too. Like you can for example, like I'm not a vMix user, but in Mimo Live, I can actually, as a mix minus, it looks like I got to go to the chat here because Cindy's commenting, but in Mimo Live, you can send whatever program is going out, you can send that back into your Zoom meeting so people can use it as a confidence monitor, so to speak, so they can see when they're on camera. But again, that's going to be dependent on the output settings that you've specified. And Cindy has a comment here. That's why I need 4K on the inputs, is what she's saying. And Guy Cochran has a link there to a Zoom support article about the enhanced media add-on with the FAQs, everything that you need to know. That's what I couldn't remember the name, but that's what they're calling it, is the enhanced media add-on. So I would recommend, if you are planning on getting that, make sure you do read the FAQ as well. And then post back, Cindy, if you have any questions, maybe on another day, once you have a chance to play with it, maybe jump into after hours or Discord, let us know how that's going, and we can try to help you out further. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Tulum, California. Chuck Hodges asks, should we be looking at Midlands Bizztalk program for some of our operations? It was recommended to us along with ways to mic the orchestra. Bizztalk.
I had to do a little bit of research on this because I've never heard of Midlands Bizztalk, but it looks like it's a two-way radio of some kind. So looks like a two-part question. We're asking about communication for comms, and then we're also talking about miking an orchestra. I don't know how much we can really address that. For radios, maybe somebody else on the panel has some experience with that, and it looks like Paul Valhus wants to jump in. Go ahead, Paul.
My first CB radio was at Midland. They make excellent equipment. I wish I knew more about this particular piece of gear. I don't.
Yeah, and for miking an orchestra, I mean, there are different techniques and certainly different microphones. We can mention a few that are popular. You could use the good old-fashioned Deca tree model for miking an orchestra, and there's so many different mics that you can use for that. Look at the Deca tree miking technique. That is something you may want to investigate. But again, we don't know how big the size of the orchestra is. So, Chuck, without knowing the exact details of it, I would say do some research on the Deca tree thing and then come back to us and maybe let us know exactly how large this orchestra is. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the Midlands Bizztalk program would have to do with miking the orchestra, because Midlands Bizztalk is just as far as I can find, it's just these walkie-talkies, comms communications transceivers. So I'm not sure if how that would relate to actually miking an orchestra for recording purposes. Maybe communications so that they could monitor. Maybe if you want to send monitor signals to them, it is an analog. I guess it's an analog system, so it would be zero delay. So maybe he's talking about putting in-ear monitors in everybody in the orchestra, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, that would be incredibly strange. And just one thing before we move on here, I just wanted to I was trying to find a photo of this, but this is a common mic technique. So I'm not going to mention specific brands of microphones, but you can see in this example, like a lot of people use Shep's microphones. So basically on like this type of mic stand, you would have two condenser microphones, typically cardioid, and then usually they use like a shotgun mic of some kind for the center mic. So that's one particular example, but I mean, there are so many different mic selections and mic choices there. Again, the size of the orchestra is going to determine where you're going to be putting these microphones, how much coverage do you actually need, and so on and so forth. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Cape Town, South Africa. And here on the panel, Hasmik Gaijar says, I have several Mac computers, my condolences, for work and personal. How do you name them? I went for Coldplay, Pink Floyd, U2, Dire Straits, Led Zeppelin, and Vagelis and Ed Sheeran. Each has a track name as a password. How do you manage your setup?
Ari.
Hasmuk, I love the track name as a password thing. Well, Ragnar, Thor, Bjorn, Frey, Lagatha, Loki, Snotra, Njord. Those are some of my computer names, and I guess you can understand the theme. Yes, I think it's an excellent idea, and I have a wallpaper that goes on those computers with their name displayed prominently to help me remember who they are.
And Craig?
Yeah, typically when I'm naming things, you can have spaces in the names, but that always ends up tripping up something. So typically when I'm naming something, I pick single names. So like U2 would be fine, or Coldplay, but using something with a space, it's just asking for trouble down the road. I also worry about spelling issues if there's multiple ways of spelling something. So I try to be as generic as possible.
And Paul.
Okay. Since I live in two locations, I live in the ATX, Austin, Texas, and I live in Hot Springs. So to keep things easy, I prefix all my computers here in Hot Springs with hot, and then I'll put like the next thing will be where they are, which in, let's say, shop, and then I'll put like NW because it's in the northwest corner. I realize it's mundane, and I do the same thing in Austin. Like ATX will be the prefix all my computers, and then mid is in the middle room and my middle office, and then SW would be in the southwest corner of my mid office. But man, I love Ari and Hasmuk's names. Those names are great. Love those Norse names and those rock star names.
And go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't name my computers because I have far too many. I'd never be able to remember all their names. I don't even have that many favorite rock stars that, I have hundreds of computers. So, no, I did have teleprompting systems. Our teleprompting systems have always been named after, uh, we, we named the systems after the cast of the Flintstones. So we had Wilma, Betty, Fred, and Barney. So that was always interesting. So we always talked about taking, Wilma out or Betty out. So that's what we named our prompting systems were named after Flintstones characters.
And Hosmet?
Yeah, I thought of this question yesterday because I moved my office setup to home, which is where I am right now. So I have 3 workstations now, or 3 desks working, and I have 2 in the office. And yesterday I sat down in front of in my study, and all my logins are my first name and the password is the group or track name. And I couldn't remember what the machine was called. Was it Ed Sheeran? Was it Led Zeppelin? And I had to figure it out. So yesterday I printed a label and put a label on the Mac Mini to say, you are Led Zeppelin. So then I know exactly which machine I'm working with. And mainly it's for when I'm on a network and I'm VPNing into different machines. It's always useful to know which machine I'm need to access, especially at work. So that's the convention I came up with.
And Paul?
Yeah, Courtney, I got an idea for you. Why don't you name all your B links after animals in the movie Roar? And just out of curiosity, what's your total count now on all your computers?
I haven't counted them lately because I did make a trip to the Goodwill the other day and took a bunch of the old desktops and drilled holes through the hard drives and took them in. So a lot of them are now deceased or living their second life and living a good second life with Goodwill in somebody's, vintage computer closet.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Chautauqua, New York. Zach Stahl-Smith asks, I have an X32 full console with an S16 stage box on A. Can I add an X32 rack to act as a second stage box on the B connection to add more channels to the main mix? And will I need to mix the rack separately on an iPad?
Yeah, you can do that. So a couple of things. One, make sure you don't have clocking issues by adding another device on there. So remember, one is going to have to be the primary clock. The other one's going to have to be the secondary, and they're all going to have to follow each other. Also, another thing with the X32 is just remember that the X32 has a maximum 48 channel count. Now, you're not going to be exceeding this channel count by, if your primary I/O is going to be one, an S16, and then second, an X32 rack, if those are going to be where all the inputs are going, then you're not going to go beyond that. But just be careful about how many devices you're adding there, because you will only ever be able to address a maximum of 48 channels on that console and control those things. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. Douglas asks, has the G2 model fixed the ATEM color space issue, also known as ATEM gray, on the USB output?
Gee, Douglas, I wish somebody on the Office Hours community or panel owned one, but I don't think anyone owns one yet. I think one of the challenges is they took so long to ship that product, and I still haven't seen anybody on YouTube. And I've been searching for someone to do an unboxing video where they're doing in-depth tests and testing every aspect of that thing, and I haven't. It's very strange because Blackmagic is so popular, and when any of the previous ATEMs have been released, there were always tons of reviewers, including Agent, what's his name, Parecki, I forget his first name.
Aaron Parecki, yes.
Aaron Parecki, yeah. And there's a lot of them out there that have reviewed these products, and for some reason, this new model is completely just, it's like it doesn't exist. I haven't seen anybody hype it up or talk
Didn't we
about it.
give one away? Didn't we
We
do a
did, but
giveaway?
nobody's like, I'm still waiting for actual tests. Like, put it under a scope. I want to see what it actually is doing, and nobody has done that yet. So I don't think we have an answer to this at the moment. But hey, let's hopefully somebody does in the next few months. We'll see what happens. Before we go to the next question, just wanted to remind everyone, because I'm a little bit behind here, if you want to ask a question on the show, you absolutely can do that. You got to be part of our community. And to do that, you got to use our Q&A system called Makana. If you don't know how to do that, you want to sign up to our newsletter, because that's going to give you the information and links into how to get into that system, how to ask those questions, vote on them. It's kind of like Reddit, where you can vote up and down, and we encourage you to do that. That helps drive the run of show. It tells us what's important, what you think is important to actually answer these questions in terms of priority, as well as you can chat with us live during the show, which a lot of you are doing right now, and that's part of the fun as well. So you can go to officehours.global/join. That's officehours.global/join. All right, let's go to the next one, Courtney.
All right, next one comes in from Cape Town, South Africa, and here on the panel, Hazmat Kajar. There is a for and against between Sony FX30 and Sony ZV-E10. Do either of them have an iOS app comparable to both the Bluetooth app by Blackmagic cameras, which I use every day to set up my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro?
Well, I have an answer for that, but Hazmat, do you want to add a little more context here?
No, you go ahead, because I had a very lonely Nikon Z6, and I tried to use that as a webcam, and because I use a teleprompter, and I set up my camera in a teleprompter, in a people's teleprompter, which is a 21-inch one, and it's almost impossible to use it for adjusting the camera, the settings, and B, because of the lack of autofocus. So that's why I thought that the Blackmagic camera 6K is a very expensive webcam. So, and besides that, I think, and besides that, you guys must know that I now need it almost full time in the studio, because we're doing podcasts. So that's why I'm tossing around for the Sony. But my suppliers mentioned that the software is not as good or comparable to Nikon, and I thought Nikon was really bad. So I'm a little anxious about jumping into a Sony and not being able to control the camera from my phone when I'm looking at my teleprompter.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue. The app that, as far as, I mean, I'm not a Sony user, but I know many people in the community that own, FX30s, FX3s, and other types of cameras, even the ZV-E series. And I know most people use the Monitor Plus app, and I don't think that's actually made by Sony. I could be wrong, but that's the one that everybody typically recommends. The autofocus on those cameras are so good, but yes, you can absolutely use an app to remotely control that camera. And Hazmat, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I think someone raised in Discord the issue of heating because he doesn't have a fan. But I saw somebody that we know from Zoom mention that they've been using the camera for a long time.
Andy Carluccio mentioned that,
yeah, and haven't had a single day's problem. So to keep the bank manager happy, I'm kind of leaning towards the ZV rather than a FX30.
Yeah. I think you'll probably be fine with it. I mean, that was the comment about the heat, that was my comment, and I don't think that'll be an issue for most people that do this type of thing, as long as you're not trying to internally record and use the HDMI out, because that's what puts the internal recording on these cameras is what puts a lot of stress on the processor, which and of course, when the processor has to work harder, it generates more heat, consumes more energy, and that's really the issue with the ZV series, because there's no internal cooling fan. You don't have that problem on the FX series because they're a cinema camera. They're designed for the rigorous world of recording long term, and they have internal cooling fans. Andy did mention you can buy a Snap-on third-party fan. There are ones on Amazon. So I think even Small Rig makes one, but I think you probably are going in the right direction. I think the ZV-E10 Mark II is the way to go with that, because they improved the autofocus on the second gen model, and I believe on the new model you can now load LUTs if you want to play around with the look of the color. So you can always do that as well. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex, that the monitor and control is the way to go. I've got a Sony ZV-E10 too, and I use the Creators app. And I will disagree with one thing you said, Alexander, about the cooling. Now, the two problems, but the ZV-E10, just the plain ZV-E10, did have cooling problems. But if you get the right replacement battery replacement, and you can run it for days and days.
You gotta have the dummy battery. That's
I ran it for about a week.
Yeah, you don't want to run these things off of USB-C. I've heard of them overheating over USB-C. So that would be my recommendation to you, Hazmak, and you can add your additional comments. But yeah, get the dummy battery for those cameras with the power supply.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I thought I came up with a very budget, elegant solution today. I snuck my Insta360 into my teleprompter. But the downside is obviously it's not an HDMI camera, and I often switch during my meetings. And I thought of actually switching the input in Zoom between my Insta, but then that's not ideal. So I think I'll plumb for the ZV.
Yeah. Have you looked at the cost of the lenses, though? Because they're more typically, like if you're going to get a zoom lens, a Sony G series, like a 24-70, it's going to be more than that camera. It's going to be like $1,400 at least. A Sigma Prime lens might be the way to go, though.
There you go. Because for the Blackmagics, I purchased the Sigma, I think they call it the Alpha series.
They're very good.
Yeah, and then the same supplier suggested I get a Sigma, I think it's 5017, which would be ideal for as a webcam. And the pricing was very attractive.
Yeah, Tamron had a great lens for that also.
Yeah, Tamron makes some good stuff. I haven't tested it with the Sony, but I know the Sigma stuff generally, it's not exactly like a Sony, but it's very, very close and very, very good. It's a good pairing with those. I've even found the Sigma stuff even on the Panasonic stuff. Like I've got Sigma lenses on my Lumix cameras, and the autofocus is being very, very good, very competitive with that stuff. And the Sigma Prime lenses are very good bang for the buck. I find color quality and overall picture quality very good. They're very, very sharp lenses for the money. It's really hard to beat those ones. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from a guy named Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington in the USA, asked to push a 44-minute video into Zoom webinar tomorrow. What are some simple solutions to do this? And would you hit the 1080p enable or leave it unchecked?
Go ahead, Ari.
So I reread the question, and I don't know if all of these qualify as simple, but here's my list anyways. 90% of my productions, I'll push program to webinar either on vMix or OBS, and that includes playing out videos. On occasion, where the production requires it, then push program from the ATEM, and when I do that, then I typically will use Playout B. Shout out to Jonas, a wonderful app. And there are other solutions in that. And also I'll mention that if you're using Webinar Plus, then you can also do that from Production Studio, of course. And I would definitely enable 1080p always.
Next question.
Yeah, and don't screen share whenever you do. Chuck Hodges from Tulum, California. From schools to companies, Anthropic has been officially banned for use by anyone who has connection to the United States government for money or data. OpenAI has the same redlines. If Claude gets banned too, is Grok World a real alternative yet as only major AI left withstanding?
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, so for those that don't know or follow it, the US DoD and Anthropic had a spat back in February, and it's still in flux. So I wouldn't say it's banned at this point. Some agencies are winding down Anthropic, and I actually think it's a good idea to be more diversified, and that the government shouldn't just be with one. I don't think that was policy before, but spreading it around is good. I'm not so sure. I haven't seen a lot of large enterprises and government lean into Grok. I think it's there as an alternative to look at, and this stuff is changing, week by week, month by month. So somebody's on top now may not be in 3 months, and so I think it's just one of those influx things that the tech leads in those agencies will have to make determination.
And Courtney.
Yeah, and I believe there are several major lawsuits concerned with this right now. So, is yet to wind its way through the courts yet to get resolved. And that could take years. So we don't really know what's happening. We don't talk politics here, so we can't really talk about the problems with doing this kind of impetuously, let's say. But I think they're really kind of the government is kind of shooting itself in the foot to limit itself to just one platform. And I think they will see the light eventually and, open up the other platforms that they've decided to, that didn't agree with their data mining, requests or insistence. And so the morals of the other companies have gotten in the way. They could work deals under the table too, so you never know what's going on in the secrets of government.
And Paul.
Yeah, Courtney, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's this guy named Matt, and I think his website is futuretools.ai. Could be wrong on that.
Matt
Correct
Wolf,
me if I'm.
yes.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Check that out. It's such a changing landscape. It changes from day to day, almost hour to hour, and all these AIs they're leapfrogging over each other. So I'd really get on that website. And that guy, have you seen his intros? They're incredible. He's got every show. He's got some incredible AI generated intro.
Futuretools.io is the website, I think. Yeah.
Go ahead, Hassan.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of talk about guardrails when the AI explosion took place about a year and a half ago. So there's a very interesting interview, I think it's with CBS and the Anthropic CEO, on the kind of issues around which they thought that it was important to have these guardrails. And it got me thinking about, we haven't really thought of all the issues may or may not. So it's a really changing environment rapidly, and it's going to take a long time before things sort out. It's kind of hard to regulate this explosion. One of the ministers I was advising, he says it's very tough to regulate technology because it changes every day, and I think that's probably the issue about educating our folks who govern on the issues. If we don't kind of have a view of what the guardrails should be, I think exponentially there'll be a lesser understanding of that as people promulgate regulations.
You hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that is exactly the challenge right now, because it's funny. There's this recurring joke, but it's absolutely true. If you don't like what you see with AI today, just wait a week, because it's going to be it will be nothing like the models are changing at such an obscene pace. How do you regulate that? How do you create laws for a fast moving technology? We've never seen this kind of thing happen before. Not at this kind of pace, not at if just imagine if processors were evolving, like if the tech that powered your computer was evolving at that kind of pace. I mean, nobody would be able to keep up with anything, right? So it's extremely hard. So I'm not sure what we're going to be able to deal with that. But that's definitely a bigger topic for another day. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Osmuk, who's just speaking there, Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. Overwhelmed by the new paradigm and syntax with names such as Clawdbot, OpenClaw, and the community is going nuts with Claude code. It's tough to keep up. Can we have a rookie's guide sessions, perhaps labs and after hours, that helps us catch up on sessions?
That's a great idea. I agree, Hasmuk. It's these names are just getting ridiculous. There's a lot of them. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about, especially if you're not in the business or needing it. I wouldn't worry about trying to stay up with the absolute latest. It's exhausting as part of my job, and it's hard to keep up. If it's not part of your job, there you can sort of ratchet it back just a little bit. I'd say, more importantly, dive in and start playing with it, and because there's a learning that you need to do that's more important than the model itself or technology. There's a learning about how to prompt it, the whole prompt engineering thing, and that doesn't matter at all whether it's Grok or OpenAI or Anthropic. Learning how to describe what your issue is and what you want help with, and then also learning how to manage the tokens or however you're being charged efficiently. That just takes time, and you have to learn it on your own. As far as I'd love to see after hours sessions set up where we can exchange, hey, this worked for me, sharing what prompts and approaches work for different people is just, it's awesome, because I can't learn everything on my own, and that when I observe somebody else, it helps me learn faster.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and to kind of expand on what Paul was talking about earlier, was the futuretools.io. Is if you're interested in this stuff and trying to keep abreast, Matt Wolf, who runs the futuretools.io website here, has this great website. It lists over 4,000 different AI tools on this website by different types of categories, and you can sort them by category, or video generation, text-to-text translation, etc. And they have this twice weekly AI briefing, and if you subscribe for free right there, it's a newsletter, and he does a twice weekly AI briefing. Plus, he also has a lot of videos that he does frequently on all the updates that have occurred this week, and the new announcements, and who's ahead in agentic, and what the scores are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you're looking for a specific type of tool, that's a good place to start. And each one of those links that are shown on that website are live, and it takes you to the sign up page for each of those tools. So if you're looking for a specific type of AI tool, you can start there. It's a good place to start. And their newsletters are pretty good, Matt Wolf. Once you get used to his reading style, you let it kind of roll off you. It annoys me, but hey, it's a great source of information.
Paul.
Yeah, Courtney, Matt Wolf. That's the name. I was trying to remember, but I watch his show. His show is incredible. He jumps into this show using an AI, technique every show, and just when you think you've figured out what tools to use, you watch the next show and you go, no, I just thought I had it. I thought I had the set of tools I need. Now I've got to switch to these new tools. And there's a guy named Chris Sabato in After Hours who did an incredible, really great tutorial on how to use Claude AI. It was awesome. He went into how to create a GitHub repository, how to do versioning control, how to do the whole process. And he made a recording of it. If you can find that recording, someone knows the link, put it in our chat, and watch that recording, or just ping Chris on on Discord, and he'll help you with that. And I'm pretty sure he's got a follow up in the works. So I would not miss that. I would not miss Chris Sabato, and there's another guy named Chirag who Guy Cochran knows about, who's like the uber expert on AI. If you can talk to that guy, he's like light years ahead of the rest of us when it comes to AI.
And Hazma.
Yeah, if you're naturally curious and you're part of the office hours community, it becomes quite addictive. So, I mean, with all the AV stuff, it was nice and slow and easy, so one could consume all of that information and knowledge. But with the AI, it's just totally different at the pace that it's going. So I've been off watching The Daily Show for 2 or 3 weeks, and before I could blink my eye, I could see this wonderful things happening around in after hours and in office hours, and the questions that were being asked. And I felt the need to jump in, but most times my curiosity and what I learn is to translate that into productivity or greater efficiency, or figure out how I can make a difference in the area that I work. So I got onto Claude, and I use the coworker, and I use Monday.com as my project management tool. And I figured out how to interrogate my Monday.com for Claude to automate a report for me. It took me about 2-3 hours to do that. And then my son called me and says, you need to save that as I forgot what they call it. To repeat that. So you save that. And I showed it to my lady. So I think, although AI is moving rapidly, but if we pick the appropriate pieces out of it, it can be extremely useful in implementing those tools within the areas that we are working in, whether it's medical or in production.
And go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I forgot one name, Hasmuk. Somebody should definitely get to help you with AI. It's Mark Britton. He's in After Hours continuously, 24/7. He's in Michigan. He's got his own fishing podcast. Great guy. He's got all the down to earth stuff about how to get up and running on AI and GitHub and all that. If you connect with him, I guarantee you get up and running.
Next question.
All right, next one comes in from Jeff Veely in Henderson, Texas. Jeff says his Roku Ultra Remote suddenly lost the ability to power on his TV. Reprogramming the infrared and CEC has not solved the problem. Any ideas?
Remote controls and CEC, two of my favorite pieces of technology that always work 100% reliably. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, a couple of things to check. Check your HDMI cable. Maybe your HDMI cable has gotten knocked around, has gotten loose or dirty. Switch it out because that CEC cable travels over the HDMI cable from the Roku to the TV. And make sure your TV has CEC enabled. So you didn't mention what type of TV you have. So make sure that's enabled. If your TV doesn't have a turn-on signal over CEC, it will have to use infrared. And since the Roku uses RF for its remote controls, you have to enable infrared in the remote. And you have to tell the remote through, I think, the Roku app, maybe what type of TV you have, so it uses the right IR codes, so it will emit an infrared signal from that remote to turn on your TV. The other thing to think about is sometimes there's something stupid like you set something on the shelf in front of the IR receiver on the TV, and a lot of times it's not really clear where that IR receiver is on the front of that TV. So make sure you don't have something that might be blocking the bezel where that infrared receiver is on your TV. So it may be, your remote may be sending the signal, but it can't get to the TV. I've also had a problem occasionally with some LED light bulbs. If you have a LED light bulb, some of them that use switching power supplies that are dimmable can generate a switched signal. That LED is flashing on and off very quickly, and it has infrared components in it, and it confuses it. It sends out basically a background noise level that's in the infrared spectrum. And so a lot of times that infrared signal won't make it through the noise if you happen to have some lights turned on in the room where the TV is. So take a look at that, try it in the dark and see if it works in the dark. If it does, then maybe that's the problem. I finally figured out my problem with one of those is it was a specific light bulb that was creating noise in the infrared spectrum that was confusing and making my infrared remotes not work. So there's a couple of things to check, but make sure CEC is turned on both the Roku and the TV, and also make sure the TV, you've programmed the right infrared codes into the Roku for your Roku remote to talk to your specific brand and model of TV.
100% I will support that. That is a great answer, Courtney. And Jeff, just as an alternative, and I recently did this because I have so many different devices here, and I wanted, it's hard to replace the Logitech Harmony remote because Logitech doesn't make those anymore. And CJ Covell recently turned me on to this product. Now, Sofa Baton, this company, they make a bunch of these different remotes. I did not buy the most expensive one, which was about $300. I bought the U2 backlit one, which was about $100. And I've been testing it. So far, it's pretty good. It has IR learning capabilities like any good universal remote should. Has a little OLED screen here at the top here. And I'm using this to control all my devices like my TV, and I create macros as well. So some of the buttons have macros that I've programmed to say, turn on the TV, turn on the AVR, turn on the Apple TV, or switch to my Blu-ray player setup, or switch to my PlayStation or setup or some other thing. And it switches all the inputs and everything like that, and it does it pretty well. So as an alternative, if you are looking for a new remote that can control everything pretty well, those are not too expensive, and they work decently. Just a reminder, if you like this show, if you like what you're seeing today, you can support us. This show is entirely driven by the community and is entirely run by a fantastic community, and we have all sorts of roles available, whether you want to join us on the panel and bring your experience to answer these questions, or you want to join us on a more technical aspect of things. There are different roles available on the crew. We're always looking for people, and we have a great back-end crew. It takes a lot to run this show. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I want you to head on over to officehours.global/volunteer. So that's the best place to go for that. And of course, you can also support us other ways. Share it with a friend, subscribe on YouTube to make sure you get notifications when this show goes live. And of course, you can donate by going to officehours.global/donate. I'm going to put a link into the chat here. That's officehours.global/donate. Thank you. Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. Have you ever used a phantom blocker when attaching audio devices with balanced outputs into a mixing console's XLR inputs? And here's a link to a phantom blocker.
Courtney.
Well, do you use phantom blockers on your football team? That's a new position, I think, phantom blocker. I would suggest turning off phantom power on any of your inputs on the console rather than using a phantom blocker. Because a phantom blocker achieves that probably in one of two ways, either using an isolation transformer, which is going to affect the quality of your audio, or capacitive coupling, which will block the DC from going down the lines. And both of those can affect the frequency response of the particular audio signal, depending upon the impedance of the cable that's plugged into it, et cetera, et cetera. So best thing to do is to, if you at least have individual control on each of the independent inputs on your mixer, make sure that phantom power is turned off if you're using a dynamic microphone or a line level signal. If you're using a line level signal, usually there is no phantom power is normally turned off, or you use a bridging input like a 1/4 inch input. A lot of times, if you use the 1/4 inch input to bridge a line level input into your console, it will not have the phantom power on it. So you wouldn't need the phantom blocker in that respect.
I find these types of devices extremely gimmicky, but like Courtney mentioned, um, I was reading the marketing material for this. I know Triton Audio, they make the Fed Head, which is has been around for a long time as an inline device that turns 48 volts phantom power, converts it to an additional 25 dB gain for low output dynamic mics and ribbon microphones, that type of thing. But when they say stuff like, well, this is useful if you're plugging in a vintage ribbon microphone into a mixer that has global phantom power, you shouldn't be plugging in an expensive ribbon mic into a cheap analog mixer that has global phantom power in the first place. Stop plugging it into a plastic Mackie mixer. That's dumb. Yeah, you bought a really nice Royer ribbon microphone. You should be plugging it into a good microphone preamp. Stop doing that. So, use a console that has selectable phantom power that can be turned off and on every single input. Some audio interfaces, consumer audio interfaces now, manufacturers have woken up to the fact that some people might want to plug into microphones that are sensitive to phantom power. So companies like Motu, if you look at the M2 audio interface, which is a 2-in, 2-out interface, very affordable interface with decent mic preamps, has selectable phantom power. The Lewitt interfaces have selectable phantom power as well, and some other, I think there are a couple others that are doing that. So just be careful about the interface that you're using. Use the right tools for the right job. If you're going to use a nice microphone that is sensitive to that, or a vintage piece of electronics, your whole signal chain should remain intact with quality components, because like Courtney said, you start putting in these little inline adapters that have all these different caps and stuff, like now your signal is going through these components, which could potentially affect the sound quality. You don't want that. All right, let's go to the next end rant. Next question.
Brody Hefner in New York City asks, my Senal XLR-to-USB converter, the XU2496C, won't work with any USB-C to USB-C cables. It requires a USB-A to USB-C for proper power delivery. Is this unique, or are there other devices that require a USB-A to USB-C cable?
Courtney, what do you think?
Yes. Usually when a device requires a USB-A to USB-C cable, it's because that device is designed to work off 5 volts and 5 volts only. Because USB-C to USB-C usually has to support the PD protocol, which lets it negotiate the voltage, the DC voltage that it can send, either source or sink. So it can either send or receive DC voltage, and that's done by little routines in the USB-C to USB-C handlers that switch between 5 volts, 9 volts, 12 volts, and 20 volts, I think, or 19 volts. So they have to handshake, agree on a voltage, and agree on a direction of the voltage. But dumb USB cables like the A to C's, the C side isn't doing any negotiating, and the A side can only deliver 5 volts DC in a certain polarity and in one direction only. It only goes out. It doesn't go in. So that's why the USB-A to USB-C is required, because it doesn't have the negotiating smarts in the cable to negotiate the power that is needed in the direction of the power. That's why it's a certain type of cable would be required.
Next question.
Next one from Henderson, Texas. Once again, Jeff Veely comes back with Mac users. Have you moved to Tahoe on your production machines? Any known compatibility issues?
Hasma, go ahead. Tahoe.
Yeah, so I think we have about 25 Mac machines both in the office and home and so on. All of them are not on Tahoe because my editors and my audio engineers, I got them to stick, not to click on the upgrade or update button. I did update one of the machines at home, and a very little known financial package called Money Dance, which I've been using for years, stopped working on my Tahoe machine. And so I've adopted the Alex Lindsay adage of being one version behind on all your production machines. So, and I've kind of stuck to that.
There is zero reason to go to Tahoe if everything is working. I'm still on, my main machine that I use is still on Sequoia. And actually, I'd prefer to use an even older operating system because all my other Macs are running Sonoma and I haven't touched them. The only reason why I even have Sequoia on my M4 Mac Mini is because that's what Apple shipped at the time. And it was horribly broken too. So, you know, your mileage may vary with pro level apps. Audinate, you know, I rely on Dante, and I'm not going to mess around in my production environment when I rely on multi-channel audio at low latency going over a network with a product that hasn't been tested and hasn't been supported. Dante Virtual Sound Card still isn't supported, still is not recommended. Lots of other pro level apps are behind. There's all sorts of weird quirks. We see this every single year with any new operating system. There are API updates, framework updates, core audio stability issues. Core audio has been a challenge for Apple for years. GUI updates. I mean, Tahoe was a big undertaking. And you know, yeah, okay, you get some new window management features in the GUI and stuff like that. And there's some legitimate things in there, but not something that I would risk the stability on with, you know, 6 months is not long enough for any operating system in my view for it to say with certainty that it is a mature platform. Okay, 12 months minimum of patching before I will even look at any operating system. And before I even use something like that, I have a spare computer, I will put it on that machine, and then I will start testing stuff. And even that, I will still go through all my vendors. I will look at what they actually support. Because guess what? If something breaks, if I go to these companies for support and they don't officially support it, I'm not going to get any help from them. They're just going to say, well, you're using the wrong operating system. We've qualified the previous version and that works fine. So why are you using that? Why are you installing that? This is why I always turn off any kind of automatic updates on all my machines. I only upgrade at my own pace. That's what I would suggest. Now, if you want to install a new operating system at your own risk, go ahead. But that's not something that I would really recommend. Go ahead, Cosmo.
Yeah, you know, they say as you get older, time and days seem to fly a lot faster. So I took up journaling for about a year and a half to try and, in my attempt to slow down time. So, you know, with iOS, I think 16 or 17, they came up with a journal app. And I was looking forward to a desktop version of it. And they released that with Tahoe. So that's about the only reason I had the incentive to install Tahoe on one of my machines. And I used a journal on that desktop. It's great. But at least I have sacrificed one machine and not my entire lineup.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to the next question.
All right. Looks like it might be our last question here from Paul Wallace here on the panel in Austin, Texas. I need a ton of screenshots from my Sony Bravia TV. What's an elegant way to grab screenshots from a Bravia?
Well, that's a good one. Before we go to Courtney, Paul, you want to give us a little more information?
Yeah, since I went to After Hours and learned AI, now I've got I'm building a ton of websites, about 100 of them, and one of them is tvreviewer.com. And I was watching the Oscars the other day, and I thought, man, it'd be cool to have a screenshot of some of the red carpet stuff, you know, and maybe some of the other things, you know. So I took my iPhone and took some pictures, but there's got to be a more elegant way to get screen captures off TV. I guess I could take YouTube TV and just do screen captures off of that. Would that be the best way to do it, or is there any other way that you guys can think of that could get decent screenshots?
Courtney, you want to help him out?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to capture off of the Bravio. Either you can record, you know, just get a recorder of some sort to record your YouTube TV and put it on your PC or your Mac, or get an outboard recorder like these game capture consoles that will record anything that comes in over HDMI at 1080p. It'll record H.264 or H.265 for 4K. That it can capture those kind of files for video. If you're talking about video or stills, that's the other question.
Stills.
Another elegant way, especially if, for people that want to do reviews of televisions, because they want to show the interface. They want to show, a lot of times they're showing, how the remote, how the menus work on the TV and so on. So just a regular recorder may not capture that if the menus are, originated within the TV itself. You're going to have to shoot it with a camera. So set up one of those fancy Sony cameras, what we know you have lots of, and put it on a tripod in front of that TV set and darken the room so you don't get any off-screen reflections. And make sure you're not getting any moire. So choose two different resolutions. Usually the Sony is high enough resolution that it won't generate moire off of a 1080p screen or even a 4K screen. So try that and just shoot stills off of your Sony to grab some, but just make sure there are no reflections in the room. So make sure that the you don't, make sure the flash is turned off on the Sony and the automatic flash, and make sure and darken the room so you don't have any off-screen reflections. That's the easiest way to grab them, and they can actually look pretty good. I did a bunch of screen captures with a video camera. I needed to capture some 720p stuff, and I just pointed one of my old video camcorders at a screen and captured tons of video footage, because I ran into HDCP problems, and that's a good way to deal with any of those copyright restrictions that you may have trying to record video into a device that may be copy protected.
Well, that will wrap our Saturday show. Thanks to all the panelists for showing up today. We really appreciate your support and answering all these wonderful questions, which, by the way, all these questions came from you. Yes, you, the producers, who showed up here to chat with us and put in these questions. We wouldn't have a show without you. Really appreciate that. And also the incredible back-end crew that shows up every single day to make sure that this show happens. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. And last but not least, just a couple of housekeeping things after this show at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. If you're interested in joining us in the new panelist meeting, you're maybe interested in being on the show, you're not sure where to start, please join us for that. And of course, right after that at 9 p.m., that's 9 a.m., that is our regular panelist meeting. So that's a meeting for existing panelists on the show. And of course, if we were to have traveled around the world to answer all of these questions, I'm not sure if we have a traversal here, and I'm going to wait a second for it to show up. Otherwise, I'm just going to end the show right now, and then there's nothing in Zoom. So, all right, well, there we go. I'm not seeing it anywhere. Oh, there it is. Okay. We would have traveled 64,000 miles. That's 104,000 kilometers. And 510 million bananas for scale. All right. We'll see you in after hours. Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, Paul, if you use your still camera, you can also zoom in on the screen to areas of interest.
Yeah, that's what I'll do. I just use my iPhone during the Oscars. Unfortunately, during the Oscars, we had a weather event in Arkansas, so I didn't even really see them. I'm looking for a rerun. I can't even find a rerun of the whole Oscars.
On the West Coast, they rerun them the same night.
Yeah, I can't find one. I cannot find one.
ABC Hulu.
Yep, sure did.
They don't show the whole. They don't show the whole.
Maybe.
They show highlights, but they don't have the whole.
They just show highlights. I need the whole thing so I can sit and watch it. I mean, if I'm going to be the TV reviewer, I need to see the Oscars.
Dr. Robert Greene, he probably has the EVS files of the red carpet
there,
stuff.
There you go, Robert Greene. Yeah. He's my best bud now.
Oh, it's.
Oh yeah. No,
it's a day later.
Oh no.
Okay. All right. Have a good day, everyone.
All right.
Yes, the E network.
E.